Today is May 4th, 2015. This interview with Edgar Lamm of Grand Rapids, Michigan is being conducted by Deb Moore of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Well, thanks for talking to me today, Ed. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about your early life, where you were born and when, and maybe a little bit about your parents.
Well, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, October 14th, 1925, and that was on the south side of Chicago in an area called Beverly Hills. My father was born also in Chicago, and my mother was born in Fulton, Illinois. But when she was a young girl, she went to business college in Dixon, Illinois, and then wanted to get into a big city, so she went to Chicago and worked for a bank. I think it was the First National Bank of Chicago at that time, and that's how she met my father. My father was a coffee salesman, and he used to carry a handbag, and he'd get on the streetcar. This was in downtown Chicago, and she'd be going to work at the bank there, and she'd see him, and she thought he was a doctor. Well, actually in his bag there, he was carrying samples of coffee, teas, spices, and all of that. So we kind of laugh about it. But anyways, that's how my mother and father met.
Okay. And then you came along, were you their first child?
Yes. Yeah, I was the first child. Actually, I didn't, should I back up a little, Deb?
Sure.
I didn't know, after I came back from the service, my mother never told me she was divorced. And I did have a brother, a stepbrother, but I didn't know at the time that he was a stepbrother. And he was 10 years older than me, and so...
Meaning you thought he was your full brother?
Yeah, I just thought, I never knew, and Mother... When I got out of the service, I guess at that time it was a little bit, if a woman was divorced or something was not...
Right.
But, you know, but anyways, so I was going out to California and during the summer for a summer job when I was home from college. And she said she had an uncle out there, or a cousin, I should say, in California, Los Angeles area. And she said, Edgar, I might as well tell you that I was married before. Here I was, maybe 22, 23, and I said, you know, it didn't mean too much at that time.
Sure.
I was a little older, but so I did have a brother, a stepbrother, and then I had a sister by my parents who was 4 years younger than me, and she lives right now in California also.
Okay, okay. So you went to school in Chicago?
I went to Morgan Park High School, graduated, almost graduated, and then they drafted me in 1944. I had about 4 months to go before to graduate, but the Army called me, and they did give me a diploma. I didn't have to go back to high school to get it. So, yeah.
Was that common at that time to call kids before they graduated?
Yeah, there was, at least in my area, there was, yeah, it seemed to be happening.
Wow. So what were your first feelings when you heard that?
When I was being drafted or taken out of high school?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I was kind of excited about going into the service. You know, back then it was kind of a big deal. You know, you had your draft card, and that was... So I guess I didn't think too much about it. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Other than the fact that I was going into the service, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So did your high school right away give you your diploma, or was that sometime later?
I think it was after, I think they had mailed it to me before I got back from service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got it somewhere in all the stuff I'm looking for, but it does say I graduated.
Okay, so you were drafted into the Army, and did you have much time before you had to go?
Well, let's see. They drafted me in February of '44, and I would have graduated in June of '44. So I went to Fort Sheridan in Illinois, and were there for maybe a couple of weeks. And mother's tuition. I told my mother, I called her one day when I was up there, and I said, Mom, I don't know, I'm going to probably go to California or Texas or someplace like that when we leave here. And she said, you know, she said, I bet you end up at Fort Custer. We got on the train, and we're probably an hour out of Chicago, and they said, okay guys, we can tell you, you're going to go to Fort Custer. Mother's tuition. So that's where we ended up, it started in.
Okay, which is down by Battle Creek, or?
Right.
Yeah. And so tell me about basic training. It lasts 12 weeks?
I think it lasted, if my memory's right, I think it was 16 weeks. 16 or 17 weeks.
And what do you remember about those weeks?
Well, we were actually basically training to be military police at that time at Fort Custer. We had to get up early in the morning, you know, 5 o'clock or something like that, and get dressed and have breakfast, and we'd be going on hikes and around Augusta and Galesburg in that area, and full packs. And I felt, you know, I was pretty good condition at 18, and I could take it, the heat and everything with a full field pack. But some of these fellows that were older, maybe, and I call it older, maybe then 35, they'd be standing in line, you know, after we get back, and they'd just faint from the exhaustion or the heat.
Yeah.
And but it was, you know, it was a lot of just basic training, doing a lot of hiking and things like that.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a hard time adjusting to military life?
I think I fell in line pretty good. I know we were fortunate enough. On Saturday, we left. There was a train that went from Battle Creek to Chicago every Saturday morning. It was right on the base there. So I was fortunate almost every weekend to go home, and my parents would meet me at the train station on the south side, and then they'd bring me back Sunday night, and I'd go back to Fort Custer. So I was very fortunate.
That was great.
Yeah, for all of those weeks of training. Uh-huh.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Did any of the guys wash out? Anybody just couldn't hack it?
No, there was somebody, a friend of mine that we were both drafted at the same time, a high school buddy. He was at the same camp, but not in the same area of the camp I was. And he had some problems adjusting to the military style.
Yeah.
And I think he went down to some place in Louisiana, some camp down there, I can't think of it. And he wasn't adjusting, and he went AWOL, and they did find him, and finally they gave him a military discharge. He just couldn't adjust to the military life that way.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't know of anybody else personally.
Right. So when you said they wanted to train you, Ed, to be an MP, did they give you an aptitude test, or they just said, you, Lamb, you're going to be an MP?
I think that was more like it. I don't think there was any special particular training at that time, other than staying in condition and hiking and learning how to shoot it. We go to target practice at the target place, but I don't think there was anything extraordinary from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, do you remember, I mean, what are the basic things you need to learn to be a military police?
Well, really, there was nothing unusual that I could see that was other than just a basic training and conditioning. We got to we were there 16 weeks at Fort Custer. I went to Fort Jackson and still had more training. mostly conditioning, and
Nothing about like laws or rules or
No,
stuff you
nothing.
were supposed to be enforcing?
no,
Oh,
yeah, it was nothing like that
okay,
that I can recall.
okay.
And eventually, well, go ahead, I'll let you ask me some more.
No, go ahead, you tell. Say.
Well, eventually, when we got overseas, I asked if I could get out of the military police part. I said I didn't enjoy, when we were in England, we were supposed to pick, this was part of our duty, which is rather not too exciting. We were supposed to pick up anybody that wouldn't salute an officer. Well, you know, I didn't enjoy that type of,
Right, you didn't see the value in that.
no, it just, because he wasn't gonna salute, okay, you have to,
Right,
I
right.
think they were giving us just something to do to fill the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And eventually I asked if I could get out of the military police, and ended up into the infantry.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, from Fort Sheridan, you went to Fort Custer, then you went to Fort Jackson
Yeah,
for
Fort
more
Jackson.
training.
For more training, and then we went to, I think it was Camp Shanks in New York, and we're only there a short time until we got on the ship, and the ship was, it was the French ship called Ile-de-France.
Okay.
It was kind of a well-known name. It was in a
Yeah.
song, one of those Cole Porter songs, I think.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't, so it was, took us 9 days to go from New York to Gerlach, Scotland.
Okay.
And we got into Scotland, and then we got on a train, and that took us to eventually Hereford, England. And that's where we stayed. Now, about that time, when we were in Hereford, England, you know, of course, the D-Day had already occurred, and also the Bulge that was still in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the major battles and fighting were over with by the time we got overseas, and I got over into, we went up from, I think, Portsmouth to Le Havre, France. That would be about the end of January of '45.
Okay.
So the war was, you know, sort of,
Winding down.
we did, yeah. So that's kind of what the time we spent in England, yeah.
Okay, so by that time you'd asked for you and got transferred from the military police to the infantry.
Yeah, to go, if I could get out of the military police and go into the
Okay.
infantry.
And the training you'd already received was sufficient for you to be
Was
in the
adequate,
infantry?
yeah, for what
Okay.
we were asked to do at that time.
Okay, so when you got to Hereford, what did you do?
Well, we were in Quonset huts, and like I said, a lot of that, they'd get us out and just walk up and down the sidewalks there. Look, ask if somebody that doesn't salute, you know,
Yeah,
pick them
right,
up.
right,
There
right.
wasn't a lot of.
Right. But what was your military objective of your group being there?
Well, waiting, because we were, in other words, we were reserves, and they were waiting to get, as they needed more people to go over into Europe,
Yeah.
in that part of Europe, I should say. We were just there kind of waiting for,
Backup,
hey,
kind of,
send
yeah.
us a couple of thousand guys, because, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
We were just in reserve.
Yeah, yeah. So after your 8 hours of work were done, what else did you do?
We'd go out and we'd go into the pubs and have a few beers at night or something like that.
Uh-huh.
We had to be back to the camp by midnight, or they'd be no-no, you know, if you were late.
Right.
A few times I had to climb over the wall there so they wouldn't see me.
Okay, so that was about it. You could go look around and have a
Yeah.
couple beers and
Yeah, it was, you know,
nothing to see there really.
no, it was a small town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out in the country.
And nice town, but, you know, there was really, there wasn't anything, you know, the war was still on and so forth, so we didn't have any bombings near us because they were, hitting London and England pretty heavily at one time.
Right.
But it was winding down,
Right.
fortunately then.
And so the action had moved to the east by then.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. They had moved. They had transported you by train.
Yeah, from Scotland, Gerlach, Scotland, to Hereford, England.
Okay. And how long were you in Hereford?
Let's see. Let's see. We got overseas. No, I think it was November 9th, and I think we left to go over to Havre, France. It was near the end of January of '45.
Okay, so you were there about 3 months.
About 3 months.
Then you moved on to France, and
Yeah.
how long were you there? Same thing?
Well, then we went into Germany, and we got into some minor skirmishes. We were in Saarlandern, Germany, our battalion, and we did see some action there, and there was quite a few. We were in a home that was actually destroyed. We lived in the basement because those homes in Germany at that time, Hitler had built, a lot of them were built very solid concrete homes to withstand this type of thing. And we'd go downstairs and we'd have to stay on guard duty, I think maybe on 3 hours and off 3 hours. We'd just go up in the living room, and which was no living room, it's just all bombed out, and look for anything we could see. Really, there was nothing, but then it was one night, the bombing started. It was up on a hill, and the Germans were lobbing these shells hitting right in the front lawn there, or front of the whole building.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought at that time, this is it. And I got down on my knees and I said, Lord, help me. And it lasted for about 4 or 5 hours.
Wow.
But it never hit a direct hit. And that's when I found my Lord.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That must have been very scary and to go on for so long.
Yeah, a kid 18, and that was pretty minor compared to what those guys went through on D-Day.
Right, right. But still, and so really, truly that, you hadn't had much religion before that or much of a spiritual life?
Yeah, I think I went to church. My mother was a Sunday school teacher, but I think it didn't have the meaning at that time that it did then.
Yeah.
It made me, I feel like I could say I'm a Christian, after that, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So then you stayed in the basement of that home for a while, and then where did you move to next?
Then we, let's see, after that next day after that bombing, the few Germans that were left surrendered. There was about 12 of them. I can see them come down the street with white flags. And I think it was because we were told that the Germans were pulling out. They were up on a hill, and it was their way of escaping with having all of this bombing coming in that distract us, because we didn't have any. It was just, all we had was rifles there, there was nothing we could do much, if anything. And so the town was completely destroyed. In fact, I don't even think it exists on the map anymore, Saarlandern.
Okay.
And then after they surrendered, there was, at night, we'd have to go across to get water. Well, the Germans were shooting out of these sewers. There was, they could come up, and if they saw you going, I know what I forgot to tell you. In that area, they had what they call a blue moon, and these were searchlights that threw enough light so you could see somebody and knew if they were an enemy or an American.
Uh-huh.
Just, and we, at night, we'd have to crawl across the street to get water because they were shooting out of these sewers. And there was a soldier, German soldier that had been killed, and he was booby-trapped. You could just see that. And I didn't want, nobody wanted to touch the wires there. So, and I don't know, Deb, I never smelled a human body, but once you smell it, you'll never forget it. But anyways, when we go across the street on our bellies and bring water back, same way, and finally when the Germans surrendered, they took a rope and they tied it some way to this guy without setting off the charge, and it went way back and pulled the rope, and the whole building that he was in blew up. So they were, and he had some souvenirs on him, you know, and that's what they wanted to do, have somebody, oh, I'll take that home. Well, if anybody had touched it before that, they never would have made it. But it was, yeah. And then from there we left and went to other places.
Uh-huh. Let me just stop a minute. So the 12 Germans that surrendered, you said they were lobbing the bombs as a diversion because there were more Germans who escaped?
Yeah.
And then they left the 12 of them there?
Yeah, they were up on a hill.
Okay.
Yeah, we were kind of in the valley of this city.
Uh-huh.
And there were some high hills there, and that's what they were figured, that they were escaping by sending these shells in so that we wouldn't disrupt their
And so they were taken prisoner of war?
The ones that surrendered, yeah.
Yeah.
The others, I don't know what happened to them. They got away for a while, I guess.
And how did you get from France to Germany in the first place?
Well, we went, let me think. We were on a truck, 2.5-ton truck, I think they called them back then, some of the time. And other times we were on a 40 and 8. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Deb. It used to be 40 men or 8 horses, and it was a French term, 40 and 8. And we were being shuttled to different locations in Germany on these 40 and 8s for a while, until we got to some place where they stopped, and I think we ended up eventually, I know, in Linz, Austria, when the war ended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were working your way behind the primary infantry that was engaging in most of the battles. You were kind of like on cleanup.
Right.
You were coming back behind them and cleanup, following the same kind of path.
That, I would say that would be correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we did see some action, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Did you see, what other action did you see between Germany and Austria?
Well, let's see, when we, there was one, we were in Germany, some part of Germany, and I remember we were walking down this road, our battalion, and we heard some shots, and everybody said, hit the ditches, you know, so we got down on hit the ditch, and there was one of our men got wounded, or one of our men got shot, and the medic, who was clearly marked, I can still see him, Deb, probably about from here up to Plymouth, went out to see what he could do for him, and he had the Red Cross on him, and he was shot also. No reason for that.
Yeah.
Then this firing was coming from out of the woods. Well, these we called up our captain and said, you know, we're getting shot at here. Why don't you bring up a tank or something? See if we can. So these guys, and they did, and these guys came out of the woods. There must have been about 30 of them, and not in uniform, which is a no-no. They probably figured they were going to surrender, and the captain, I remember him saying, you know, after he shot that medic, killed him, he said, we're not taking any prisoners today. They all come out, and they
Wow.
destroyed them too. So it was, you know, it happens on both sides of the
Yep.
war.
Sure. Sure. Wow. You mentioned your battalion. Is there a battalion number there? The
I think it's on my
got the
form. There's a 260.
You got 65th Division,
Right.
Company E, 2nd Battalion, 260th Infantry Regiment.
Yeah, that's what was
Okay.
on my
Okay.
my discharge.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that's
I
where
wanted to be
copied that.
I want to be sure we got that in there.
I couldn't remember.
So all the time after you left England, in between, and when you got to Austria, how many months was that? How long were you in Europe at?
Well, let's see. I think we got in. I think the war ended. I think in April, approximately of 1945, and we were in Linz, Austria at that time, and it was announced that the war was over with in Europe, and they said General Patton, this was the Third Army, was going to come in and review you fellas. So get yourself looking nice, get your clothes washed, and so anyways, he came in with in a very small airplane with a Russian general, and I was in the front rank there, and I could hear his voice saying, "This is what we call a battalion," and he had his ivory pistols, just like the movie Patton. If you saw it, this is exactly where he looked.
Okay.
And he had a very high-pitched voice. Now this is how I remember it. And I read somewhere, you know, he loved horses, and he had fallen off a horse sometime during his career, and it affected his vocal cords. And his voice was very feminine,
Yeah.
really. And you know, you almost thought it was a woman if you didn't see him.
Yeah.
And that's how I remembered it. So we did stand guard, and I did see him in person, not to talk to, but at least he walked by me. Yeah.
What was the common soldier's impressions of, how had you thought of Patton?
Well, I think at
At
that
the time.
time, you know, he was a doer. He loved to fight. He loved war. And some of the things that came out afterwards, after the war and everything, we heard about. Maybe the slapping incident where he slapped the soldier for, you know, maybe not wanting to go up into battle. And but he used to say, call him blood and guts. Yeah, his guts are blood, you know. And but I think at that time, most people that I know of in our rank and would say that, you know, he was a good general. He was going right out with the fellas. He wasn't. Yeah, he loved the battle.
Yeah, yeah.
He wanted to go in, and he was always getting into trouble. He wanted to go right to Berlin. He wanted to go into Russia. And Eisenhower had to keep scolding him all the time.
Put the brakes on a little of that
Right.
enthusiasm.
Yep.
So all the time you were in Europe, did you get any free time?
Well, when the war ended, yeah, we were in in Austria for a while, in Linz, Austria. Went out into the rural area, and so many people were displaced in Europe. You know, they were trying to find their home, and we were going, and the Russians were on one side of the railroad track, and we were on the other. And we'd let these people go through. You know, they'd show us their, I don't know if they weren't a passport, but some sort of a recognition who they were. And they would go through the Russian area. And we were sleeping actually, at that time, for that duty, we were sleeping in a barn, you know, and because they said, those are people's homes, you don't disturb them. You sleep in a barn. So, but on the Russian side, they'd move right into the homes, and the people, because their homes that were, you know, everybody in the barn.
Sure.
Yeah. So, anyways, we did befriend some of these Russian soldiers at that time, and they were just like us, you know, young, and so, but we got along with them okay, just as one soldier to another.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But then when we moved back, the territories were changing. We kept moving away from that area. Most of the town was mostly women and children asked if they could come with us, because with the Russians, you know, they were afraid that things were going to happen.
Right, right. They didn't trust the Russians.
Right.
Right.
Because the Germans had done the same thing to them when they were going through Russia. And
Right.
So they put these women and children in the truck with us, and we moved back away from it. So, yeah, so they could at least...
So you were able to honor that and to move them back?
Yeah.
Okay, farther west.
Yeah, it was, you know, maybe a mile or two, or I can't
Okay,
remember the
okay.
distances, but
Right,
yeah.
right, right. And then they would be on their own. I mean,
Yeah, then wherever they wanted to scatter to, you know.
Yeah.
Because there was so many people that were, you know, just trying to find a place to live, and because they were all disrupted. There was so much, all their homes were gone.
chaos,
and
yeah.
It was just
Yeah,
unbelievable.
yeah.
Yeah.
So all those months that you were in Europe, you had your sleeping bag on a truck or something, or how did you?
No, we usually slept, we had a sleeping bag, yeah.
Uh-huh.
We'd sleep probably on the ground. If we removed a little bit, we might find a home that was vacated and spend the night there, you know, just to try to get a decent night's sleep. And
Yeah.
then we'd be marching away in the next assignment, wherever they were taking us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, and it was winter.
Yeah, it wasn't at that particular area that we were in. Yeah, it was.
But
It really wasn't a bad winter for us. Now I know in that bulge, that was in Belgium.
yeah,
There was, from all the pictures, they just had snow,
yeah.
unbelievable. But
Uh-huh.
we didn't.
It was a little more mild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Well,
didn't
thank
have
goodness.
a severe cold wind
Yeah.
and a lot of snow
Yeah.
where we were at.
Right. So you had the clothes in your back,
Yeah.
and then you just wore those day after day, or
Well, once they come up and give us our K ration, I think they were called, K rations then, or C rations, and they bring us up socks, underwear, you know, we could replace it that way too, and just kind of keep us. So I always,
like a supply truck would
Yeah.
come. Okay.
yeah, and I keep always an extra pair of socks in my pocket because, you know, you perspire a lot, walking all in your big boots.
Yeah.
It's not good for your feet
No.
after so long.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And tell me what it's like eating K rations or C rations.
Well, it wasn't fine dining, but you know, when you're hungry, you eat about anything. Yeah, they weren't too bad.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was something, you know, because at that age I was pretty hungry most of the time anyway.
Yeah. If you not even considering you were marching all day.
Yeah, just walking. I don't know about marching, but we were on the move, you know.
Yeah. Constantly. You would have had to have a lot of calories. What do you think the morale was like in your unit?
I would say it was pretty good. There was one fellow that kind of lost it. It was too much for him. He was just kind of cracking up a little bit. But overall, I think most of us were very fortunate and where we were at and what we had to go through, and you just accepted it as, you know, best you could.
I mean, there was an element of danger, but you weren't in mortal fear like probably the ones in the front line.
Definitely.
You know, so you had to appreciate that.
Yep.
Were there any casualties?
Other.
Well, then the medic.
Yeah, other than the medic, and in the unit that I was in, I don't remember any other
Okay.
casualties.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a blessing. Did you guys have time to play cards or write letters or?
I did write quite a few V-mails to my parents. Yeah. And when we stopped somewhere, I could write it, and it was, at that time everything was censored. So and then every once in a while we get mail, and you know, maybe we hadn't gotten the mail for 2 or 3 weeks, and it would just pile up, you know.
That was a happy day.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you kind of censored your own letters, knowing that the censors would do it if you didn't.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to tell them where you were at.
You couldn't even say we're in Germany or we're in England.
Well, yeah, I think when we were in England, that was okay, but we weren't supposed to tell them where we were when we got across the channel in Germany or France
Yeah, I see.
or Austria
On the mainland.
at
Okay.
that time.
Okay. Okay. So did everybody smoke? Did all the soldiers smoke?
Oh yeah, I smoked. They had cigarettes that they were just giving them away to you. You know, yeah. But fortunately, I quit smoking after I I smoked, but I wasn't a heavy smoker. But yeah, I did smoke.
Okay. But people weren't drinking too much or doing drugs or anything like that?
I never heard of any drugs then.
Uh-huh.
If there was any drinking, I know they'd have these shops that maybe were deserted, and if you wanted to grab a bottle of wine, I guess you would, but I never.
It wasn't a problem.
Yeah, it just didn't seem to mean much to me at that time.
Yeah, yeah. So you really didn't have too much interaction with people in the countries and with the civilians?
We did have, when we were in Austria, we befriended an Austrian farmer, and we traded bread. They'd bring us up white bread, and they never, had no white bread for several years. And we traded, and they'd have this brown bread. It was kind of shaped like a round, you know. I thought it was great. You grab a piece of that, and it was like a meal in itself.
So thick.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so we traded. We'd give them the white bread, and they'd give us their brown bread.
Uh-huh.
And this Austrian farmer, and I remember there was, they weren't to have any arms, and this deer, I was over talking to him one time, and pointing, I said, yeah, deer, can you shoot it? I didn't have the gun. I couldn't shoot the thing. And I think he was kind of mad at me, but.
Because he wanted it for supper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they weren't starving.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were,
Yeah.
if
Right.
I was hungry and had to have food, I would have shot it.
Yeah,
But
right.
the thing was looking at me, and I said, I can't shoot you. So you can see I never was a hunter.
I can see that. I can see that. So for the most part, the people that you ran into were happy to see American soldiers?
Yeah, the ones that we befriended, they were nice people, like farmers, Austrian farm people, and they, we were only there for a short time, then we moved on. But I would say most of the people that we interacted with were very, they weren't hostile toward us or anything that I was aware of.
Right. Okay, good. So you were never really, once you got to Europe, in a situation where you had any entertainment, like movies or performers come over, USO?
I remember when we pulled back, when we left, we went back to Le Havre, France, to eventually go home from there. And we would get, I know Bob Hope was playing nearby, but I asked if I could go, and they said, well, they got so many, there's no room for you. But I think once in a while we get a movie.
Okay.
And in the camp there, this was these tents, they were great big tents. They were adequate, to sleep in and so forth, because there wasn't a rough winter. And we were just really kind of waiting to go home. I think I was there in Le Havre for about 6 months before they could you know, have a ship come and take us back.
Wow.
Yeah, it was about 6 months waiting to go
Whoa.
home after the war.
So did you do a lot of sightseeing at that time?
I got a job. I asked him. I said, I asked the sergeant. I said, give me something to do. I'm going nuts. He said, you want to drive a truck and pick up the mail from the port? And I said, sure. So I would drive a truck down to the docks and pick the mail up and bring it back to the camp, just for something to keep myself busy.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there waiting.
Right.
And,
Right. But there wasn't enough time, like, to go to Paris or go.
Well, yeah, I did. Yeah, you mentioned. Good thing you mentioned it. Yeah, we did. Took a couple of trips to Paris, and then they opened up a trip to Switzerland, and so I think there was about a dozen of us guys that said, "Yeah, I'll go." And so we went to St. Moritz, Switzerland, did some skiing.
Fun.
And things like that. It was a beautiful town. The war hadn't disturbed them.
Right.
And the food, chocolates, ice cream, anything you want. We didn't. They had plenty of. So that was. I think we were there about 2 weeks.
That was a treat.
That was a nice trip to Switzerland.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Because you kept thinking that any time a ship would come, or did they?
Yeah, they just, and we went back on the Ernie Pyle. Remember Ernie Pyle?
Yeah.
It was a new ship. And when we finally got our time, we boarded and went into, I think it was Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Okay.
We were there for a couple of days. They gave us anything we wanted to eat, and then we got on a train, and I ended up in Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, for discharge.
Okay. So, and then your parents came and got you there, or?
No, then I got on a train, went to Chicago, and told my parents I'm on my way home. And there was the Rock Island Railroad at that time took me to pretty close to where they lived. Then I got on a streetcar and got into the neighborhood where we lived at that time. We had moved from the house I was born in. My parents had moved to an apartment from a bungalow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have a party for you, or what happened when you got home?
No, actually, it was just it was kind of a quiet time.
Okay.
Yeah, it just my dad was working, and they were, naturally glad to have me home, but there wasn't anything extraordinary. But that was okay.
Okay.
I was just glad to get home.
Yeah, I bet you were. So, what do you think the lasting effects, the positive effects of being in the military were on you, Ed?
Well, I think it was a wonderful experience, and seeing the world, seeing the other part of the world, and seeing some part of the war, and how people react, and just a wonderful experience that way. If I had come back, wounded or something like that, I probably would have thought differently. But I was very fortunate that I didn't have a problem that way.
Right.
But I was very proud to be able to serve our country, and still would be if I was at the age. And so it was. I thought it was a very. And they went to college on the GI Bill, which the government did that for me. So I was very appreciative of everything that happened to me.
Yeah. So no psychological trauma from your time?
No, I think I was. I probably got a little depressed, not knowing what it was back then, when I came home. But I think I was. The folks. They just sort of talked to me, and I don't think they knew what it was either. They said, well, yeah, maybe just kind of relax, don't worry about it or something, you know,
Right,
little
right.
things like
It's
that.
Time will take care of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it
Which
wasn't
was
anything,
true.
fortunately, too serious that I'm.
Right, right, right. And so you said you used the GI Bill then?
Yeah, I went 4 years of college. I went to, graduated from Eureka College in 1950.
Okay.
Yeah.
With a degree in?
It was a degree in, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology.
Okay,
I thought I wanted to get into that type of work, but I actually ended up, after I got out of college, getting into sales. And when I got back home, when I graduated from college, I mean, the first job I had was I worked for United Airlines.
mm-hmm,
And they had hired me in Chicago, and I was in Rockford, Illinois, because I, you know, was single still. And then I went to Walla Walla, Washington, Pendleton, Oregon, and then ended up in Toledo, Ohio. It was about a year, and we did everything except fly the plane. There were smaller planes, and we had to load the luggage, ticket people, put the bags on the plane, and there were small airplanes. They only held about 28 people,
mm-hmm,
all engine,
mm-hmm.
propeller driven. And so I kept asking for, I said, I want to get into sales. Well, you know, this and that. And they kept kind of leading me on. It was a good job in its day. And I ended up in Toledo, and I told them, I said, well, I'm going to give you 2 weeks' notice that I'm not getting what I want to do. And they said, well, we'll transfer you any place you want to go to. And I said, it's not that. I want to sell something. And so I gave them my 2 weeks' notice, and then they wanted me back and so forth. But when I was home, that particular time, my mother was reading an ad in the Chicago Tribune and said, Mars Candy is looking for 3 salesmen. And she said, why don't you go down and apply for the job? It was on the north side of Chicago. And the rest is history. I worked for M&M Mars for 35 years.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's great.
So I finally got into what I wanted to do. I wanted to sell something.
Good for you. Good for you. So you don't see any, I mean, do you think the Army helped you mature at all, or anything in that
Oh,
department?
I think it did, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah. Yeah, I think the Army taught me, like you said, made me mature and accept things in life that, you know, maybe you don't like what you have to do, but you do it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I had good, most of the time the people that were above me in rank and everything, I was treated, you know, fairly,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you were in the service for 2 years and 4 months?
Yeah, I think it was about 27 months, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
uh-huh.
And so really you never got back home. Once you go to Europe, that's it. You don't get to go back home in between.
No.
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 Yeah.
I don't think that happened too often
Yeah.
in World War II.
Yeah.
But
Sound like you made a pretty good adjustment though to coming back home and going to college and getting a job and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
yeah, I had told my mother when I get back, you know, I was working for doing that postal job in the Army, and I said, I think, Mom, I said, I think I'll go to work for the post office. She said, you're going to college.
Okay, good, good. And the GI Bill paid for the whole thing?
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to tell me that I didn't mention? Anything we overlooked?
I think that we touched all the bases pretty
Okay.
much, you know,
Okay, good.
that were important in my life when
Good.
I was in the service. Yeah.
Right, okay, good. Well, thanks for your service, Ed, and thanks for talking to me today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for coming up and interviewing and so forth.
Good.